There are spaces between light and dark.
She kept talking about leaving this world.
Between life and death.
And I saw the figure of a woman, an old woman, float across the room.
Within these spaces roam trapped souls. Souls that will no longer remain quiet.
There was something that wanted me out of that house. He's getting closer.
I don't know what to do.
I just want him to run.
The theater is a place of magic and play, of transformation and shifting identities, a place where time goes backwards and forwards, and where people long gone can walk about and speak. One such soul haunted a mother and daughter in the Biddeford City Theater.
Oh, this one would be good.
Meet Debbie and Kate Arsenault.
Perfect for that number. We can have
Debbie teaches children's dance here at the Biddeford City Theater. Kate's her daughter. They know the world of the theater well, but a while back, the line between fantasy and reality got a little fuzzy.
During the summer, I was here with about 40 children for a summer camp, and they were upstairs in the theater having voice lesson, and I was downstairs making some lunches. Someone was behind me singing in my ear, this really high soprano voice. I turned around to see who it was that was standing next to me, and there was nobody there.
But soon, things began to happen that Deb could see. Other people saw them too.
It seemed to be every time we were in a rehearsal that the lights would start swinging.
Step. What's going on with the lights here? Everybody step forward from underneath the lights. Come out from under there.
And what we noticed was, during these rehearsals, the more the children were there, or young people, the more entertainment that we saw from those lights.
So, perhaps the invisible soprano had some connection to children. But what? Did she like children? Katie and her friends weren't all that sure.
My friends and I had to go into the dressing room where our clothes were to get a costume, bring it down. And we went up and we were kind of scary because it's the third floor and it gets really dark. As we went into the dressing room, we heard footsteps right behind us, loud, heavy footsteps. We all turned around and nothing was there. We just looked at each other and ran. We were so scared. They followed us all the way down the stairs.
The rumor of a ghost traveled quickly to the local newspaper, and a reporter started digging through the theater's history for clues. Around the turn of the century, Biddeford was a thriving mill town, and the theater was known as the Opera House. The reporters were looking for some connection between the ghost soprano and something that might have happened on the stage. They found it. On page 8 of the Biddeford Weekly Journal, a young woman named Ava Gray died on the very same stage Debbie and Kate dance on. Ava was a singer, a lyric soprano with a traveling repertory company. She was touring alone with her young daughter. She sang the last song of her life on the stage of the Biddeford City Theater. It was Halloween Eve.
They were performing here, and Eva literally sang her heart out on the stage for the people of the city of Biddeford. She received a loud ovation and a curtain call. So she returned, and for the curtain call, she selected a song, Goodbye, Little Girl, Goodbye.
After she sang this song to her daughter, she walked off stage. And had a heart attack and died.
It was very ironic that her last song was Goodbye, Little Girl, Goodbye, when she had this 3-year-old little girl to take care of. Very sad tale.
And
Now the bewildering events of the past few months seemed somehow different to Debbie Arsenault. Gone was any fear or sense of menace. The ghost had a name, the ghost had feelings, longings, and sorrows.
It all just seemed to make sense now that she was, you know, liking what was happening in this theater and liking the fact that I was here, that I was doing things with kids and bringing kids into the theater.
Kate understood, too. The kind soul of a young girl went out to Ava Gray.
after I found out who she was and how she died and how she had a daughter, I felt really bad. I felt sorry for it.
So Katie and her friends went to the theater in search of Ava. Maybe Katie never read a book about how to talk to a ghost, but her heart told her what to do, what to say. It was Halloween Eve.
I had to explain to her what was happening and who we all were, and nobody had ever encountered ghosts before. I said, we know what happened, and we know how you died, and your daughter's, was left here without you, and you must be sad because we feel bad. And I went up on the stage, and the curtain was closed, and as I got to the edge of the curtain, I felt her. It was really, really cold, and I said, "You guys, she's right here," and they're like, "No, you're kidding. You're trying to scare us." And then somebody came up and said, "No, she's not lying," and she was right there in the middle of all of us. I was white, my heart was pounding, and as we're standing there, we told her that it was okay now because everything's all right, and there's people here and there's kids here and everything's going on. We all know about you, and we all know what's happened, and it's okay for you to leave now. Something behind us, just like a voice, just whimpered, crying. At that moment, my mother opened the door and came in, and it broke the moment. And then after that, she was gone. We don't know what happened. She just left. I feel that Eva left happy, because I think she might have been here for a long time, really sad when we told her that, that we cared about her and that we'd miss her if she was to leave, but it was okay to leave. I think she left happily. I really do.
Never has more American blood been shed in battle than during the 4 violent years of the Civil War. More than 600,000 men died long before their time, killed by their countrymen before they could marry, build a house, have children. Some people say the old battlefields are haunted by such men in search of another chance at life. If one of these unquiet ghosts were looking to make use of a sympathetic soul, a living soul that is, it just might be Tim Fredrickson, a Civil War reenactor. There are thousands of men like Tim. The Civil War is their passion. They wear the old uniforms, carry real weapons, and march onto blood-stained battlefields into the roar of cannons. Sometimes they can forget where the dead soldiers leave off and where they themselves begin.
I've been reenacting living history for almost 17 years now. I can't explain the connection, but every time I come out here, they're with me. They're out here on the field.
Who might more easily cross a line of reality than a man who's already crossed a line of belief? One night, as Tim lay sleeping in his bed, the spirit of the Civil War came into his life as it never had before.
I wake up and I hear somebody saying, sir, you've got to get up right now. Just a few months later, I physically felt a hand grab my shoulder and shake me like somebody was right there shaking me. And I know I jumped. I must have jumped a foot because, there's somebody in my house. I'm sitting bolt upright in the bed and there's not a soul there. There's nobody in the room whatsoever. But I physically felt that hand on my shoulder.
300 miles away in Gettysburg, Tim's good buddy Mike Flood was also sleeping. And at the very same moment, something tapped him on the shoulder too.
Someone was tapping on my shoulder. Looked up and I didn't see anybody. Shortly after that, I heard some booming. I thought something was exploding in town. I looked out there, but nobody else seemed to be concerned with it. I had this feeling that somebody was in the room. When I looked up, there was like soldiers standing at the end of my bed. And I could tell they were wearing Union uniforms. I could see the color of the pants, light blue trousers and the darker blue jackets. And one guy started speaking to me. He said he was a sergeant with the 116th Pennsylvania. He said, well, we want to talk to you on the battlefield. I said, I'm not going out there. I said, I'm staying in my room. And the other soldier said, well, we're going to see you later. And with that, they turned and left. And I couldn't sleep the rest of the night.
When Tim joined Mike in Gettysburg the next day for a trip to the battlefield, the two friends realized what an amazing coincidence had taken place. After years of merely reenacting the Civil War, it now seemed that Tim and Mike were being invited to join their ghostly comrades. They talked about it over dinner. Tim wanted to go out to the battlefield, but Mike was still too shook up by what had happened the night before.
I could see in his eyes that they were he had no intentions of, even thinking about going out there after dark.
Mike really wanted to go back to his hotel room where it was safe. But the next thing he knew, he was being pulled by a force that he could not resist.
I got this really strange image that I was seeing these dead soldiers on the battlefield. Both Union and Confederate soldiers lying dead in the field.
He just immediately says, we've got to pay the check and go right now. We have to leave right now.
Tim Fredrickson and Michael Flood walked out of an ordinary restaurant in a small Pennsylvania town onto the hallowed battlefield of Gettysburg and into another dimension.
I really could almost feel like there was a charge of electricity in the air.
I knew that there was more than just Tim and I at the site. I looked to my left and I looked to my right, and I got this really strange sensation that people were walking by me.
Before I can say a word, he doesn't even look at me, and the words out of his mouth are, Tim, do you see them? Do you see them?
I know what I was looking at, but I wasn't sure if anybody else was seeing this.
I'm seeing something that I cannot fathom myself. We are having over 150 men literally appear in front of our eyes, facing us. We're looking at them, and they're staring right through us.
Like a spike, the gaze of the ghost soldiers pinned Mike to the ground.
I wanted to run, but I couldn't.
I said, Mike, we've got to go. Mike, it is time to leave.
Then, suddenly, Mike snapped out of it.
I finally got the courage or ability to move my feet and walk, and we got back to the car, and I peered over my shoulder just a couple times, and it was still they were still standing there, wherever they were. And we got in the car and we left. Like fast.
But this was an encounter they couldn't just walk away from. They needed to know why them. What did it mean?
The majority of these young men died far before their times. And on a hallowed ground like Gettysburg, you're talking like 50,000 men in 3 days.
But maybe they relate to us as doing reenactments and try to live like a real Civil War soldier.
I feel that they may have felt that I was a conduit. I was that conduit that they could use, if you will, to communicate with the other world, to communicate with our world.
But what if communicating with another world becomes a journey of no return? For Tim, the allure of the dead soldier's world is strong, but so is his fear.
I want to reach out to them. But I don't know if I reach out to them and make physical contact with them, what will happen? I don't know if I went over to the other side. Could I even get back?
Mike and Tim were able to keep their feet in our world. This time. Chris Woodyard knows a thing or two about ghosts. At age 4, she first began to sense them. When she was 7, she saw a little ghost girl crouched on her grandmother's hearth. Years later, a long-dead bishop looked up from his desk and smiled at her. Destiny called. Today, Chris Woodyard is a ghost hunter.
I have been seeing and sensing spirits for a very long time. It's just something that comes to me, and you start getting a picture of someone, and then it's almost like they're building up in front of your eyes. When you have an event that's very traumatic, very emotionally charged, somehow it becomes recorded, almost like a videotape, upon the atmosphere or even in the fabric of the building. It runs in our family to see and sense ghosts. My grandfather, his father before him, my daughter have inherited this particular ability. I hesitate to call it a gift.
Gifted or burdened, Chris is someone people call when they have ghost trouble. This time it was Don, Jennifer, and Naya Immel, a sweet Midwestern family, with something lurking in their attic.
Jennifer called me, and she said, "I think I have a ghost." And I said, "Stop right there. I don't want to hear another word. Give me the address. I'll be there."
When she arrived at the scene, nothing seemed amiss. But what met the eye did not reveal what the Immels had been experiencing inside their house.
I know I'm being watched.
There's something angry upstairs that protects its spot.
It's a bad feeling.
And it worried me that there was this thing in my attic.
He's getting closer.
Something may happen.
And you can't stop it. We need help. We need this fixed.
And now help had arrived. As the Immels waited, Chris moved through the house in search of the ghost. Her instincts awakened. She began to see what the others had only felt.
I went to the foot of the stairs. I froze. I was staring up at this awful, malevolent being. There were waves of hatred oozing off of this guy at the top of the stairs. He was all hunched over, crouched down, and he was kind of leering down at me. And I took a deep breath and stood there a moment, and I went up the stairs to see what this was.
Chris had a job to do, and like it or not, she had to go after this thing.
So I got to the top of the stairs, and whatever it was wasn't there anymore. He had gone away, and I wasn't quite sure where. I thought maybe into the attic to my left. So I walked over to the attic, and I opened the door. This energy came rushing at me, knocked my head back. I leaped back, and I just said, "Oh my God, oh my God."
For the first time in her life, Chris had been attacked by a ghost. So this was the nature of the beast. What was she going to tell the Immels?
I had never run into anything quite this negative, and I was afraid of scaring them.
Chris decided it would be best to break the news gradually.
I told them that I had felt a man, a very angry man, in the attic. The main place I felt him was in the attic.
Images formed in Chris's mind. The ghost was a poor farmhand who lived in the attic. One night, worn out and alone, he died in his sleep.
And he just didn't know he was dead. He woke up and he thought everything was fine, but nobody could hear him and nobody could see him. And he was trying frantically to make someone understand that he was still here. Anger is a very strong emotion, and perhaps that's the only way he could manifest himself.
The ghost unveiled, Chris now had to give the Immels her conclusion. Better think about moving out.
Is that bad?
I couldn't live here.
But they couldn't imagine leaving their dream house. Once again, they looked to Chris for advice. Was there anything else she could do?
I don't do spirit rescue myself, but I can tell people how it's done. You just have to get their attention and make them understand they really are dead and it's time to move along.
One night, Jen found the courage to follow Chris's instructions. Dreading what she might find, Jennifer approached the attic. As soon as she opened the door, she felt him there. She began to speak.
I told him, we live here now. He doesn't belong here. It's just time for him to go. I was there another few seconds, and I got the impression he either wasn't listening, this wasn't working. So I said, if you want to stay, you need to stay up here. You need to leave us alone.
Then Jennifer walked downstairs and back into the world of the living. She had done all she could. For the next few days, the Immels waited to see what would happen. Nothing happened. The worst seemed to be over. When Chris checked up on them a while later, she agreed.
And things did calm down quite a bit after that.
The ghost still hasn't left. But at least he's coexisting with the Immels, and they feel they have Chris to thank for that. As for Chris, she'll remember that angry man in the attic for a long time to come.
Usually when I go in, it's a departed relative, or it's a lady in white, or it's just a memory of something that might have happened in the past. I never expected to find something this negative, especially in a charming little house like this.
Case closed. But someday soon, Chris Woodyard, ghost investigator, will get another call. In her world, there is no shortage of ghosts.
I knew there was something behind that fire because it had a life of its own.
Carol says her grandma got so mad that she burned the house down. The strange thing was, she had been dead for years. To understand why a grandmother might come back and set fire to her family's house, we have to go back to a time when Grandma Helen Batistini was powerfully alive, when she exerted a mysterious influence that kept her family in line.
She was a very powerful person. She dominated whatever space she took up.
Every summer, Helen gathered her clan together in the Batistini compound on the coast of Maine. Her granddaughter Carol remembers the days when everyone used to get along so well.
When I was a kid, we had a lot of fun here. We had company, there were people in and out. It was fun times. My grandmother, she didn't like anything better than someone coming over and talking with them, just chatting.
Grandma was a gracious woman as long as everybody played by her rules. And if they didn't, well, Grandma let Carol know early on that she had otherworldly ways of getting what she wanted.
I used to ask her, Grandma, how come you always know where I am and what I'm doing, even though I'm blocks away? And she would always just kind of smile at me and say, well, you know, I'm a witch. And I never thought anything of it at the time.
Many years later, Carol Schulte would find out that her grandmother could wield her power even from the grave. When she knew that her end was near, Helen retreated to one of the little back houses, and there she held court, watching over her brood until she died.
She was just a few days out of the hospital, and I knew they couldn't do any more for her there. She was sleeping right in this room. She had a bed right over here against the wall. When I came down, and she wanted to die, and she put her arms up and she says, oh God, please take me, please take me.
And with that, Helen was gone. Or so her family believed. Carol and her companion Dick moved with their kids into Grandma's house. Helen was no longer around to grant permission. Carol put her son Robert in Grandma's bed.
My son would wake up in the middle of the night screaming.
And of course, there was never anything there that we could see.
Well, this went on night after night.
After about the 5th or 6th or maybe 7th night of this, I came down the steps and demanded that, this has got to stop. Well, I'm going to prove to you there's nothing, there's nothing here. And I yelled at the thing that was knocking on the door, knocking on the windows, that if you're here, show yourself. And of course, she didn't show herself right then.
But Dick's challenge was answered soon enough one night when he was sleeping.
My eyes went wide open, and I looked over and I saw the figure of an old woman, float across the room and out the window.
And he said it was a scraggly old lady. It was all hunched over, terrible posture. She had like almost bald spots on her head. Her hair was very sparse, and she had a big nose and stern. And I said, that's my grandmother.
Why, Carol and Dick wondered, had the long arm of Grandma reached out from the grave? Carol's daughter Nancy and Dick's daughter April decided to find out. They called a family conference with Helen Batistini herself.
Carol's daughter came over and said, we were messing around with doing a seance, and April really acted strange. You guys got to come over.
They'd found a way to communicate with Helen. When we got over there, I could see that April was acting as a medium for my grandmother. Then I started to communicate to my grandmother. And then my grandmother would communicate back through April.
And Helen wanted to know who these people were and what they were doing in this house and why are you all here and who the hell is sleeping in my bed.
Grandma was back, and she meant business.
Helen thought that we had invaded her house, and she thought that we had taken over. See, she was the takeover person. Somebody taking over her stuff was a new experience for her. I told her that she needed to pass on, that she didn't need to be there, that this wasn't doing her any good.
But Carol had underestimated her grandmother. Helen wasn't going anywhere. Her job wasn't over yet. A family feud was simmering, and Grandma planned to put a lid on it. Back when Carol and her brothers and sisters were kids, it might have been fun to be crowded into a couple of small houses together. But as they got older, they got territorial. This is mine, that's yours. That's not what Helen Batistini expected of her family. One day, the big house caught fire.
It was angry. It was an angry fire.
I grabbed the door, the fire backdrafted and blew me off the front porch.
I saw that fire just swallow up everything in its path.
The next day, Carol walked through the ruin of the house. Amid the charred remains, she thinks she found her grandmother's calling card.
I looked down near the front door, and there was this piece of pipe on which the words "witch" were embossed. My grandmother, she's the one who had told me she was a witch. I think she did this. That was her way of letting everybody here know, I have had it. You're not going to disturb the atmosphere here anymore.
The Batistini clan is rebuilding the house now. Carol wants everyone to get along. She knows that in some way, her grandmother is still keeping watch.
If emotional turmoil continues throughout the building of this house, Helen will return in some way. And we'll know it.
The Wild West, a land of violence and short lives, of massacres, stagecoach robberies, and range wars. A land where old ghosts roam, restless spirits of men who lived and died by the gun. This is the story of the ghost of Eugenio Salazar. In the 1880s, he was alive and young and very tough. He and his good buddy Billy the Kid palled around together, tempting fate and mocking death. Like the time they burst out of a flaming house into a hail of gunfire. They got hit, but they got away. Unlike Billy, Eugenio survived the violence of his times. He raised a family and he put down roots in a quiet, peaceful canyon that still bears his name. The spirit of Eugenio was strong in this place, something to be respected. For more than 100 years, Salazars came and went, keeping the canyon the way Eugenio had left it. But not long ago, the current resident of Salazar Canyon, Eugenio's grandson Joe, did something no Salazar had ever done. He began building his family a great big house right on top of his grandfather's little adobe. Joe was born too late to meet the old man, but as he would soon discover, disturbing Eugenio's property would be enough to bring him back. When the Salazar's ghostly trouble started, it wasn't all that clear at first what was going on or who was behind it. The women felt it first.
And I just happened to look up, and there was this female form.
You'd catch just the tail end out of the corner of your eye, maybe, of a long white skirt.
Like the skirts of a lady from the 1800s swishing behind me.
But if you ever looked directly at it, you couldn't see it.
A ghostly woman in a white skirt didn't particularly scare Joe. It is very hard to scare Joe Salazar.
Well, in the beginning, when things were really starting to heat up around here, Joe didn't quite believe us.
Anything I didn't see, it's not so.
He would say it was our imagination, or the cat did it, or the wind did it, or something. He always had an explanation.
I was trying to raise him not to be afraid of nothing.
But one night, something happened to Joe that made him change his tune.
All of a sudden I hear something like 9 dogs that we have. They would all quit barking at one time, and I thought, well, that's kind of strange. Still didn't pay attention to it. I heard a loud noise in the kitchen, so I ran back in my room, picked up the .44 Magnum. If anything would have moved, I'd have put 5-6 rounds into it. Went around the corner and there was nothing there. I could hear noises, people walking around upstairs, up and down the stairs. And this went on for a half hour. It sounded like a convention going on here. Dory and Lacey and Colleen came back from choir practice, and I told them, I said, well, I can see what you were going through. And I said, nobody's going to stay here alone.
Unnerving sounds in the kitchen, an unidentified ghost woman on the stairs. Who might have had reason to haunt the Salazars? Finally, one of the ghosts revealed himself to Joe.
Joe had a rather frightening experience that I slept through.
Yeah, one night I put my book down and I turned over on my side. It's kind of frightening to turn the light out and see somebody standing 2 feet from you. I thought it was surreal.
And he had to go over the top of me to get to his gun.
I looked into his face and he didn't show any expression at all. He was just standing there looking at me. Next thing I knew, it just disappeared.
I asked him who it was, and the more he talked about it, the more it seemed as if it were his grandfather.
I'd seen some pictures of my grandfather. He used to wear a top coat all the time and 3-piece suit. I'm almost positive that's who it was.
The ghost of Grandpa Eugenio, of course. And maybe the ghost woman was his wife. Knowing that some of the ghosts were family made it hard to throw them out. But Joe decided he had to protect his home, the way Eugenio would have done. Joe's guns would be useless. He summoned a priest.
He gave us each a candle, and he went from room to room, even the closets, blessing it. He asked the spirits to leave and go where they should be.
When the blessing was over, a welcome peace finally settled onto Salazar Canyon. The restless spirits of Eugenio and his wife had departed. But Joe understands the instinct that drew them back to defend their home. After all, Joe is a bit on the rough side himself.
Most of these people that are restless have lived a real violent life. My grandfather was one of them. The law of the land was a weapon. And if you couldn't fight with a weapon, you would perish.
Joe turned out to be a real chip off the old block. Eugenio could not have found a more worthy match than his own grandson. Most people don't really believe in ghosts. Maybe it takes an encounter with one to change the average person's mind. That's what happened to Art Garcia.
My grandmother lived in Alcalde, New Mexico. She told us ghost stories when we were kids, I think like every other grandparent tells. And I had never experienced it, and so I really had no reason to believe in them.
But Art found out that a person could, quite innocently, step into the wrong place at the wrong time and find himself haunted. This is Art Garcia's story, but it could have happened to anyone. Art's misadventure began in this building. Today, it's an inviting little hotel called the Grand Corner Inn. But years ago, it was a run-down old house with something sinister living in its rooms. Art Garcia didn't know that. At the time of our story, Artie was young, a clear-headed fellow who never even thought about ghosts. He was still living with his parents, and the main thing on his mind was finding a cheap place to call his own.
And then when I mentioned it to this friend of mine, she told me about this place where they were living and that they would be moving out. And as long as you did the cleaning and things there, you wouldn't have to pay rent.
But Artie would discover that he would end up paying anyway, with his peace of mind.
The caretakers of the building had moved out kind of overnight.
But they never talked about the events that happened while they were living there.
Even now, Artie cannot say for certain what touched off the weird chain of events. Surely it was something he didn't mean to do.
I think when Artie started cleaning, he went down to the basement and he moved something that he really wasn't supposed to move. One night we got a call from Artie, and he told us somebody was in the building.
I thought someone had broken into the second floor. A few moments after that, the noise became extremely loud.
So his dad got ready and he grabbed a bat, and so he drove over there to see what was going on.
Artie's mother called the police. They raced to the scene.
The noise was totally engulfing the whole second floor, when all of a sudden the noise also moved up to the roof.
When my husband got there, the first unit was there with 2 cops, but they didn't want to go in. He put the phone up towards the roof of the house, and I could hear those footsteps like if they were coming in at any moment.
I realized that I really couldn't get out of the building. The only way out was through the second floor. And I looked down the steps, and I heard whatever it was come through that door.
And he kept telling me, Mom, they're coming and they're getting here, but I don't know what to do.
The curtains were flying, and it had a horrible stench, like rotting flesh, like death. And I could feel it moving up the steps and brushed my side. It was freezing, and I knew I had to get out of here. I had to get out of this building. The next thing I knew, I was running down the steps to the second floor and then down to the first floor. When I got out that door, it was a complete relief.
With Artie safely outside, the police entered the house and began a search.
The only item left behind were all the frozen plants. They were brittle and fell to the floor.
Looking back, Artie probably should have moved out of that house. But most of us don't like to turn tail and run.
I told him, you better come home with your dad for tonight and see what happens. But then he said, no, I need to go back. I'm not going to be scared.
So Art Garcia went back into the house on Grant Corner. And night after night, the same terrifying things kept happening. Artie's mother and father had tried to reason with him, but now they were gravely worried. They turned for help to their faith.
A priest approached me and asked if he could come and assist with the problem. At that point, I was so exhausted, I agreed. And it was like a movie. We stood very close to him and we followed him as he went through the entire house and blessed the entire house.
The priest had finished, but something stayed behind.
I started hearing voices and started experiencing phenomena in the house. I could hear them talking. Just as I thought I had heard a word, I couldn't make clear of it. I couldn't get the sense of it. I would stay so quiet to hear the conversation, and I could never make out a single word they said.
Enough. Artie gave in, packed up, and got out. Now, years later, Art Garcia is safe in a new home of his own, and ghosts no longer bother him.
This was really an experience for me. A real experience. I hope it never happens again.
But it will happen again. Somewhere, somebody else will learn what Art Garcia learned the hard way. Certain doors are better left unopened.
This is just a reminder to subscribe to enjoy our growing collection of paranormal content Don't forget to like your favorite episode and ring the bell to be notified of new content. As always, thanks for watching.